The reason why we don't prescribe a single herb is because a single herb itself can have side effects. If I just prescribe a single herb and it's good for cough, but it also moves the bowels, and I only want it to treat the cough, then it's a problem if someone gets diarrhea. Thanks for treating the cough, Tyler, but now I'm in toilet all day. So when we combine herbs, we can emphasize certain qualities and de-emphasize certain qualities.
Welcome, Tyler. Great to have you on board and hear all about Chinese medicine. So what is Chinese medicine?
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. So Chinese medicine, a number of therapies make up what we call Chinese medicine. The obvious ones, acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, but also there's a system of Chinese dietary therapy, also Chinese exercise therapy and meditation, which is called Qigong, and also Chinese massage, all part of the same system.
Cool. So what's the difference between acupuncture and dry needling? Because I know that with Chinese medicine, there's so many modalities. There's the cupping, the acupuncture, the dry needling. Yeah, if you could give us
dry needling is an interesting one. It's gotten very popular in the last few years. The main difference I always explain to clients between dry needling and acupuncture is dry needling is a 2-day qualification. Acupuncture takes 4 years to learn. So acupuncture is a lot more involved. And it's been interesting because we've had there's been a bit of a rivalry for a few years about acupuncturists not so happy about the idea of dry needling. Prior to us becoming a registered medical profession, physios would just refer to it as acupuncture. So I've got a physio mate who used to do acupuncture, and then we got what they call protection of title, which means you cannot say you're an acupuncturist unless you have a degree in acupuncture. You cannot say you do acupuncture unless you have the degree. So the name was changed. But the practice is essentially the same. And it's interesting when you speak to people who practice dry needling, they'll often say, oh no, it's very different because we use different needles. Well, they're the same needles, but they label the box differently. So it's very clever marketing for the people who sell the needles. We use different points. We use trigger points. I said, well, actually, we just have different names for them. We called them tender points 2,000 years ago. So we kind of get dibs on that one. And often with dry needling, they put the needle in, then take it straight back out again. That is a technique we use in Chinese medicine. We just don't use it that often. It's called Bachelor. It's a 2,000-year-old technique. Insert the needle, manipulate, take it back out again. It's just not used all the time. So essentially, acupuncture takes dry needling takes one very small component of acupuncture and trains it to other healthcare professionals. I initially took this as flattery. I said, imitation is the sincerest form. And I thought it's great. They're finally all catching on and doing acupuncture. But I must say, I've had concerns in recent years because there's been a few accidents. There's been a few collapsed lungs. There's even been a stroke, which have been caused by dry needling, which is disappointing. And so the way we're sort of looking now is suggesting that dry needling's fine, but it should have the same amount of training as acupuncture. And the answer people often say to me, oh, but my physiotherapist is a great physiotherapist. I'm sure they are. I don't doubt it. And I'm sure your chiropractor is a good chiropractor. I'm a good acupuncturist, but I'm a terrible physiotherapist, and I'm an even worse chiropractor. So I think people should sort of stick with what they're trained with. But I like the idea of dry needling. I'd just like to see more education for it. Essentially, it's acupuncture without proper training.
Well, my novice understanding is acupuncture has a health science behind it, and it's basically going for energy circuits around the body, nerve centers, trigger points, things like that, and you can actually treat ailments. Now, the physio using dry needling is usually looking for muscle release where you've got firm muscle. So there seems to be a different intention altogether from the physiotherapist's perspective, or say a myotherapist who is actually really working on the fascia and the muscles and things like that. And say, look, you're really tight in that spot. I think we can loosen that up with some dry needling. And I have got that from physios and myotherapists. But my experience with you with acupuncture was very specific. You were dealing with sciatica when I came to you. I had a really bad back problem. And you approached it from 5 or 6 different angles, and you left the needles in for a while, you twisted them here and there, whereas with the dry needlers, they go in, they leave them for a while, they pull them out, it to me is that the function of dry needling is great. It's for a purpose, but the function for acupuncture is I'm actually coming to see a doctor of acupuncture, of medicine, who might understand that you're actually treating specific elements that are not just physical. They can be emotional, mental, and otherwise connected. So that's
there's a
really cool.
much larger scope of practice with acupuncture. I mean, and a part of it is musculoskeletal. We do musculoskeletal and deal with joints and fascia and connective tissue and muscles and ligaments and bones and everything else. But we also deal with, as you said, emotional problems, respiratory problems, digestive problems, skin condition, women's health. So there's a much broader range of scope in acupuncture than there is in dry needling. But we like to always point out there's no tricks in dry needling we didn't already know in acupuncture. So everything that's done in dry needling is done in acupuncture. It's just one small component of it.
Sure. And this isn't to say anything against either or in benefit of one over the other. It's more what is the specific modality for the specific challenge. And the other thing too is you have over 25 years experience in Chinese medicine, which means that you're not just narrow-mindedly going in with acupuncture or just Chinese medicine herbs. You're looking holistically at the whole dynamic of the person's ailment. So you're going to reach into that tool bag for certain specific remedies that you're familiar with, that you've treated before, and that you have the education behind. So how was your journey for 25 years in Chinese medicine? I first met you down in Kooringal. Now you're in Seaford. Yeah, what's going on for you there?
Yeah, look, I used to operate a home clinic in Kooringal. We're at house and clinic together now. I've got a shop front. A lot of practitioners nowadays work with other practitioners. I've got another practitioner working with me just in recent years, but I largely still sort of work by myself. I still do the same thing. I just have more rooms and more space nowadays, which is great. It's something I'd always intended on doing, and having a shop front here, I also have I have my rooms where I do acupuncture. I have a full herbal dispensary, and I'm also lucky enough to have a great little room out the front where I do a bit of Tai Chi as well, which is really lovely and a great way to start the day. So,
Well, the other thing too is that what a lot of people don't realise is when you are able to do dry needling, you haven't done a bachelor's degree, whereas to be a proper acupuncturist, there's a bachelor's degree of acupuncture. So there's a lot more study of the anatomy. Mind you, the people who apply dry needling, for instance, our myotherapist where I work, he's got a profound knowledge of the human anatomy as well, but it's not always the case. So you have a bachelor's degree in acupuncture, a bachelor's degree in Chinese herbal medicine, and a sixth degree in Chinese traditional martial arts.
Martial arts,
yeah. What flavour?
Well, mostly Tai Chi nowadays. I started off as a Kung Fu kid. I watched too many Bruce Lee movies as a kid and said, one day I'm going to be a Kung Fu master. And I think I got to about the age of 14 and realized that wasn't much of a career option to be a Kung Fu master. And I also realized I wasn't much good at beating people up. I'd been doing martial arts since I was 5 years old. And I thought, well, I always remembered watching David Carradine in Kung Fu and thought, oh, I'm going to do Chinese medicine one day. And so I decided at 14, I'm going to do Chinese medicine. And I actually left martial arts for a few years and then came back to it in recent years, but much more from the health perspective. And sort of realized a dream, went to China, sat my exams in Beijing, got the toughest place to do the exam with the toughest examiner. So no one could ever doubt it. And I got my 6th degree. So I was very happy with it. As I said, much more of a health emphasis nowadays. I've never been in a fight and I don't intend to be. It's more about battling illness and poor health.
I spent several years in martial arts. I was with the GKR crew, and
fantastic.
So tangled up with Bob Jones in my early years. But I basically, my interest was really just fellowship and sport. I just really enjoyed the people. There's a lot of men and women there. It was another social scene, and it was applying exercise to something that gave me something back, and it's only in the latter years I'm now starting to see the finer finesse of working out in gyms and things like that. But in the early days it was boring as hell, just pumping iron. Well, now I'm actually overcoming strategic challenges with my body, so it's more interesting, and it's a bit of a I wouldn't call it a blood sport, but it's a sport of applying myself. So does acupuncture hurt? Does it work?
Well, acupuncture, I always say, I think people assume it's going to be like getting an injection, and it's definitely not like getting injections. If it was like, I mean, I do a dozen needles in a treatment. If it was like getting a dozen injections, I would not be as busy as I am. It's not as bad as an injection. It's not as bad as getting a piercing or a tattoo, which are things we elect to do all the time, but it's not pain-free. In fact, legally, people aren't allowed to say that it's completely pain-free. There is laser acupuncture, which has some popularity nowadays. It's a little bit different. The way a lot of practitioners get around it is now we have available, actually, when I first started 25 years ago, you couldn't get these, but now you can get very, very fine needles, ultra fine needles, which they load through a tube, and there's very little sensation from them. So they're very fine, they're very delicate. They even do cosmetic work with them nowadays. I tend to go more with the old style. I'm sort of a mind of, I think of it like a massage. If I get a massage, I can't feel it, can't do much. Probably very relaxing, but it's not going to get in. So a lot of my acupuncture I use for musculoskeletal problems, and I want to be able to really get in there. So I tend to use heavier needles. As I said, most of the time I couldn't possibly cause more pain than a lot of my clients come in already. So most people are okay with it.
Well, there's such a wide scope with medicine, and your general practitioner who's a doctor can't cover every aspect. And I would say in Chinese medicine there's specialities as well. I notice you do a lot of Chinese herbal medicine. So how does that differ from naturopathy, the Chinese herbal medicine?
Chinese, we say Chinese herbal medicine, we say we're herbalists, but that's kind of a misnomer, because a herbalist would imply we prescribe a single herb. Like a herbalist gives you a herb. You've got constipation, take this herb. You have reflux, take this herb. Whereas in Chinese medicine, we're really formulists. So we use herbal formulas, and we combine herbs in different ways. And a lot of Chinese herbs have been borrowed over the years and used by naturopaths, but often in entirely different ways, and often sort of treated independently as separate entities. Whereas in Chinese medicine, we're a flavor-based medicine. So we combine flavors together. We know that the sweet flavor is nourishing and building, and the sour flavor is contracting and astringing. You think like when you drink something really sour, it makes everything pucker. And so when you put sweet with sour together, it builds fluids in the body. So it's all about combining flavors and then coming up with a herbal formula. And there's traditional formulas and there's modern prescribed formulas. But what isn't Chinese herbal medicine is Western herbs, vitamins and minerals and all these sort of things. Now, there are a lot of Chinese medicine practitioners who prescribe those, but it's not part of Chinese medicine. So I have very little knowledge of vitamins and minerals and Western herbs. People say, hey, I've got lavender. What do you think? I say, well, it smells nice. I don't know much about it. I only know my Chinese herbs.
Well, it's interesting. I know with a lot of nutrition, there's a lot of synthesis with vitamins. For instance, if you take vitamin D3 for your immune system, when you lack sunlight and things like that, the vitamin K2 should be a co-traveler with that, so that the vitamin D3 goes into your bones instead of your bloodstream, so you don't get calcification of the joints. So there's often a synergy. And I know with herbs, where you've got anti-inflammatories, you've got things that can work against each other when you combine them, and they're things that empower, like, for instance, turmeric and curcumin. You add the crushed ground organic black pepper to turmeric, and it exacerbates the curcumin, which is the cancer properties. So is there that element also in the Chinese?
Yeah, well, that's our reason for combining, because from our point of view, the reason why we don't prescribe a single herb is because a single herb itself can have side effects. Now, there might not be side effects in the way we think of it from a modern medicine point of view, but if I just prescribe a single herb and it's good for cough, but it also moves the bowels, and I only want it to treat the cough, then it's a problem if someone gets diarrhea. Thanks for treating the cough, Tyler, but now I'm in toilet all day. So when we combine herbs, we can emphasize certain qualities and de-emphasize certain qualities. And we have structures, the way we put together a herbal formula, that have been practiced. I mean, the original structures are put together in our the Yellow Emperor's Classic, which is a 2,000-year-old textbook, and it talks about having a main herb, and then having herbs that assist that, then herbs that counteract any of the negative properties, then herbs that direct it to certain areas. So it's a very precise formula science. It's not sort of, here's all the herbs for cough, put them all in together, that'll treat cough. Even right down to, and this was an interesting conversation I had with a Western herbal student who came in. She said, oh, what's that herb good for? I said, cough. And she said, what's that herb good for? I said, cough. She said, do you put two together? And I said, no, that one's for a heat cough. That one's for a cold cough. That one's for a phlegmy cough with a lot of yellow phlegm. That one's for a phlegmy cough with a lot of white phlegm. So they're two different conditions. She said, oh, we put both together and just using the same. And I said, it even comes right down to the example I always give is apricot kernel. Apricot kernel from the north of China is considered a different herb to apricot kernel from the south of China. Exactly the same species, but they work differently in the body. So there's what we call detail, like where it's grown. Even that affects the herbs. And that's why all the herbs I use come from China, not from Australia. I'd love to buy them grown in Australia, but in our soil, they will behave differently. So we have to get them from the original source.
Well, it's interesting. People say, "Oh, I feel sick. I'm off to the doctor." So they've done a self-analysis, and they'll say, oh, "I've got a cough, cold sore, or whatever the case may be," and then the doctor's got to somehow examine them to find out what the real specific issue is. Now, when people come to Chinese medicine looking for herbal treatment or acupuncture, often, I presume, you would through some diagnostic process. Do you use any energy stuff like there's some products out there now called Healy and Ness, where you can energetically find out what's going on in different organs and things like that? Do you have any diagnostics, or do you just perceptually evaluate? How do you diagnose before you treat?
Yeah. Look, there are people nowadays who use all sorts of different machines and things, and there is now a sort of a shift. One branch of Chinese medicine there that sort of relies more on interpreting blood tests and what have you.
Oh, yeah.
That's not the way I go. That's a more modern approach. Traditional diagnostics is all taken from the pulse. So the pulse in Chinese medicine is our key diagnostic criteria. When we take the pulse, people say, "Oh, but it's just fast or slow. That's it." I'm like, well, that's two qualities. I always say it's great when I have nurses come in, because nurses know 8 qualities to the pulse. They know the fast pulse, the slow pulse. They know the deep pulse and the superficial pulse. They know the strong pulse and the weak pulse, and they know those all straight away as soon as they feel the pulse. They also know an intermittent pulse, one that doesn't have a regular rhythm, or a thready pulse that's quite common in a lot of heart conditions. And then I always say in Chinese medicine, we've just got 20 other qualities on top of that, and we take them over 3 different positions on the wrist: the chest cavity, the abdominal cavity, and the pelvic cavity, and 3 different depths: the surface, the channels, and the organs. So it's quite precise pulse diagnosis, and it's something which they always said takes 20 years to master. And I will absolutely say, when I finished uni, I was pretty sure I had it nailed. I knew exactly what I was doing. And about 20 years after that, I realized that I had no idea when I left university. And yeah, it takes about 20 years. So primarily pulse diagnosis traditionally. Also tongue diagnosis is very popular in Chinese medicine. I don't use it myself. It's from a Chinese medicine point of view, it's more modern. It's only in the last 500 years or so they've looked at tongues. I'm like, oh, that's practically new age. I don't do that. I just stick with the pulse. But tongue diagnosis in the Japanese branches of Chinese medicine, or Japanese traditional medicine, abdominal diagnosis, palpating the abdomen. And then, of course, we use questioning and listening, and even pressing and palpating the different points in much the same way that a physical therapist would feel a joint and sort of assess that way. So there's a whole range. But myself, I don't look at the new stuff. As I said, there is a bit of a shift. And I think a lot of it is because when you hear it takes 20 years to master the pulse, some people say, I don't have 20 years, I need to start now. So they start looking at how we can interpret blood tests and hormone function tests and stool samples and all sorts of different things. But in my opinion, it's an adaptation of Chinese medicine, but it's not the way it's meant to be practiced.
That's interesting, because I just stumbled on, I don't watch much of Netflix, but there was a Korean series, I forget what it was called, but there was this acupuncturist, and he traveled through time. But the interesting thing is his diagnosis was always pulse.
Yeah. A few of us have been talking about that, because they've been quite authentic in the way they've presented him, which was good. Yeah.
Oh, you've seen that series, have you?
Yeah, I haven't seen it myself, but a few of my colleagues have been talking about it, saying you got to look at, they've done a really good job of accurately portraying us.
I found it really special. It was just one of those left field things that I was up late and I thought, I need to distract myself. So I had a look at it, and from that, I did get some interesting viewpoints from it. So, tell me, are there any endangered species used in Chinese medicine?
I'm glad you asked that.
People got this thing, lizards and turtles and frogs and dogs, God knows what else. So what's that?
There are animal products used in Chinese medicine. I use animal products here at my clinic. I use oyster shell, which is mostly calcium carbonate. So if you've ever taken a calcium supplement, it's usually made from oyster shell. I use a few different shells and things, but it is one thing that comes up. It even came up recently with the beginning of the coronavirus. There was some question as to whether the initial strain of coronavirus might have come from pangolins. Now, most people seem to think it came from a bat, but they were talking about, could it have come from pangolins? So immediately they looked to Chinese medicine and say, your fault, because you guys are taking the pangolins and using their scales. There was endangered species that were originally used in Chinese medicine. They're not used in Australia. And the first one that always comes up is rhinoceros horn. And it's one of my things it's really sad for me, because my family, we're really an animal sort of friendly family. And it was something my daughter came home one day and said, one of the guys at school said you use rhino horns. Now, anybody that thinks a rhino horn has been used in Australia is kidding themselves. Rhino horns were originally used in Chinese medicine a long time ago, never as an aphrodisiac. That's a little bit of a slur from the media. They always go, oh, they were using it as an aphrodisiac, because it makes it look even more criminal. It was actually used as a herbal or medicinal product to cool the blood. So it's kind of the opposite of an aphrodisiac, really. It was used to cool the blood, and they worked out many years ago that you could use water buffalo horn with a similar effect. Rhino horn is still traded, and it's awful that there's still a trade for rhino horn, but it's traded for exactly the same reasons as ivory. It's a product which has a perceived value. It has no practical value. Nobody uses rhino horn. No one could afford to use it. No poor Chinese herbalist could actually afford to own rhino horn or use it. It's traded amongst businessmen as something that's very valuable to own, just like ivory. And the same for things like tiger products. They're not used. They don't happen. People, is there tiger bone in tiger balm? No, there's definitely not. So I don't know of anyone in Australia that has ever had any opportunity to use endangered species. I know that nobody would. I will say at the university where I studied, we had a pangolin scale, which was really great to see, because it was interesting to see its structure, and pangolins do shed their scales. And I even was chatting to a zookeeper just recently about it, and he said, oh, you're one of those Chinese medicine guys. So we had a good chat. So I put him at ease that we weren't here to hunt for them. He said, yeah, look, we actually find the pangolin scales, but we're specifically told not to offer them to Chinese medicine people because we don't want to create a demand for them. And I said, well, look, they're just not used nowadays. One thing that is still used sometimes is endangered plants, and people don't tend to worry much about that or think about it. And I said, we're very specific at my clinic, and I know with a lot of my colleagues, not to even use endangered plants, because when you take an endangered plant away from an ecosystem, it can affect so many different layers. Now, a lot of the time people might not worry so much about the plant. Oh, I don't really care if that plant's here or not, but you've got to think about all the effects later on. So we're even specific down to not endangered plants nowadays. So.
Well, the ecosystem out there has a correspondence to the ecosystem in here. And if we're not,
that's a huge part of Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
That's actually my emphasis, and what I teach internationally is talking about how the environment affects our inside environment.
Oh, definitely. From my training and background through behavioral modeling and NLP, we often refer to the ladder of influence that comes down from spiritual to values, beliefs. Environment is so important, and your responses, all these things are, you're moving through fields all the time, different energy fields and influences. And if you're unaware of the connectivity of all these things, you just stumble through like a bull in a china shop and wonder why you've got problems. But as you get older, you go, I think I better consider this, because the ramifications may not affect me, but they may affect someone else. So, that's cool. So are the herbs coming from China safe?
Yeah, look, it was one of the questions that came up recently, particularly with initially with coronavirus, when people didn't really understand what was going on. They said, "Is it okay to still get herbs from China?" And I said, "Look, they're perfectly safe getting herbs from China. In fact, as I said, we want herbs from China because then that we can trust what they do. So
Mhm.
a herb grown in the right environment, we know what it'll do. Whereas the same herb grown in Australia, I can't be 100% sure how it will affect the body. It's grown in different soil, different climate, and what have you." One of the beautiful things that happened in recent years, and I eat humble pie on this one every day, and I'm so happy to. I had an organic shop that used to be next door to my clinic here, and it was great. He's one of my best friends, and first thing he came in, "Do you have organic Chinese herbs?" And I said, "No, we'll never have organic Chinese herbs. China's not interested. So there'll never be organic Chinese herbs. They're just what he calls conventional, what we call conventional, like with pesticides, herbicides, everything else." In recent years, that's completely changed, which is lovely. There's a fellow called Simon Feeney. He has a business called Empirical Health, which is up in Port Macquarie. And he gets all these herbs coming. He goes over to China and sources them all with what we call the DDAL, like sourcing them grown in the original environment, grown on the original soil, the original way. A lot of it is what we call woods grown or wild cultivated. So it's not grown on farms, it's grown up on the mountainside, the way it was
Oh,
traditionally grown.
yeah, sure.
And China's been quite clever on this. China's managed to do something that we haven't done well, and that is they've started to really monetize the environment. And some people get upset about this. Oh, that's the wrong reasons. Said, well, look, it's the wrong reasons, but we had all the right reasons here to recycle, and then we're not really doing very well at executing it. We stopped. We were exporting all our glass to China, our plastic to China for them to recycle, and we got upset when they didn't want to recycle it anymore. And what China's done is said, "Look, you want herbs that are grown in the traditional manner. You want us to not use pesticides and herbicides. Are you willing to pay a little bit more?" And I say, "Oh, yeah, we'll pay a little bit more." And they go, "Right, well, we'd like you to employ one of our environmental scientists to go into the area to confirm there's no environmental damage to the area." "Oh, we can do that." Okay. "Oh, very good. We'd like you to employ our local village people and farmers to farm the herbs for you in the traditional manner." "Oh, we can do that." We'd like you to pay them to replant the same herb when they pick it out. So every time they pull out the licorice, they plant a licorice seed in the same hole. "Oh, yeah, yeah, we can do that." And they go, "And we'll just charge you a little bit more." And each time they just charge a little bit more. So it does get more expensive, but the end result is these amazing herbs that are so far beyond organic. My herbal supplier recently got himself, he said, "Oh, I finally got around to getting certified organic." And I said, "Oh, you lowered yourself, did you?" Because the Australian organic standard's 126 pesticides. He tested for 409. So
Wow.
it's so far beyond the organic standard. The herbs are just beautiful quality. Now, not everybody is using these, admittedly. I use them in my clinic. I love them. And I think there's nothing wrong with conventional products. Most of us eat conventional food, which has herbicides and pesticides. Most of us don't have a best mate who owns an organic shop next door so they can get it cheap. But I do feel that medicine should be held to a higher standard, and herbal medicine should be free of other chemicals and what have you. So I like the idea we can get these beautiful, we 0.00% of any pesticide, herbicide. And I found out something recently interesting about heavy metals. I said, "Oh, heavy metal free." And my herb supplier put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't tell anyone they're heavy metal free." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because nothing's heavy metal free. There's heavy metals in the air." And I said, "Well, the amounts of heavy metals are so incredibly low, but nothing can truly say it's heavy metal free because there's heavy metals in the air." But I said, "They're about as pure as you can get." And it's beautiful being able to get these. And what we really love is it's now employing people in China and these traditional cultures to go back to their sort of family heritage of growing in these traditional ways. We've got videos of them up on the mountainside saying, this is where I grow here, and that mountain over there I grow on there, and my family comes and collects them, and they get looked after really well, and the environment's getting looked after really well. And China, who may have been behind in environmental stuff for years, is on its way to being well ahead of the rest of the world. And I think they're just, yeah, they're being clever about it.
Okay. Well, I know people go and see a doctor to get treatment for something that's wrong. Do you get people coming to you for treatment for things that are right? In other words, they want to enhance their health. They want a higher level of life experience, and they want some
Mm.
tonics or some body work or some sort of intervention that actually improves their well-being from where they are. There's nothing wrong with them. They didn't come with an ailment, but they just say, "Look, how can I go to another level with my health?" Because in martial arts, there is that always aspiring to a higher level, I'm in that health area where I'm always trying to aspire to a higher level. So I'm seeking out things like exercise physiologists, myotherapists, strategy, nutritionists. I'm always looking for edge. Is there an aspect of your practice or what you do that supplies that to people? Do you get that demand?
Yeah, look, preventative medicine is a big part of Chinese medicine. Historically, they talk about 3 levels of physician. There's a little story they often tell. There was 3 brothers, and one was very famous all throughout China because he saved people on his deathbed. And the second brother was only famous in his province because he saved people who were quite sick, but he wasn't saving people on his deathbed. He was only known in his province. And the oldest brother, he was only known in his local village. He treated people before they got ill. And the oldest brother is considered the highest level physician. The youngest brother is considered the lowest level physician. And unfortunately, it means that most practitioners like myself, we are the lowest level physicians. We're treating illnesses after they've already happened. And I'd love to be doing more preventative work, but honestly, most people come in, oh, look, my back's really wrecked. That's when they arrive. But what we get out of that is an opening into, okay, now we've fixed this. Let's get you back for treatment to make sure it stays that way. And it's like, I know I used to work with a chiropractor, and he was big on getting people back for, quite often weekly, or very frequent sort of regular maintenance treatments. I don't work as frequently as that when it's maintenance. Most Chinese medicine people don't, but there is always things we can do. I've never taken a pulse that's perfectly balanced. So there's always something we can treat. And quite often we're looking at just maintaining health or sort of heading things off before they come worse, or preventing things from coming back, which is the main way I do preventative medicine. Someone like yourself, when you've had back pain, the sort of steps you've had to take to make sure it stays away. It doesn't just stay away by itself. My ideal is for people to do exactly what you said, to manage it with exercise. I treat an injury, you manage it just with exercise. I treat an illness with herbs, you manage it later just with diet. In reality, most people are very intent on paying off my next extension of my home and coming back frequently. So I say, look, you're welcome to come back, but if you want to wait till you get sick, you might only come in 6 times, but it's 6 times in a row. If you want to come in once a month just for maintenance, then you get to be well all the time. You don't get sick and tired of seeing my face.
In the last 10 years, I've seen a doctor twice for a checkup.
Fantastic. That's great to hear, Fred.
I've got a little bit of Stemetil in the cupboard in case I get vertigo, because I got an attack of that 10 years ago. And I'd stumbled on that packet the other day by accident, and all the tablets are intact. I haven't used them.
That's the insurance policy.
And other than that, I don't have a tablet in the house. I have a few nutritionals, a few herbs, but that's it. And I'm 68 next Tuesday, so I'm pretty happy with it.
Happy birthday for next Tuesday. Well done. Fantastic.
Yeah, and you set me on the path with the back, because after I had that back issue, which was so bad, I did 2.5 years of Feldenkrais.
Oh, magnificent.
And then I went on to yoga.
This is exercise therapy, postural training, so important, and so much better than having me stick needles in you.
Well, I think there's a place for everything. I do have knee issues. I might come and see you over those and see if there's any enhancements, improvement. I wouldn't mind just popping down and seeing you and having a session, because that would be enjoyable. So how do we get in touch with you? Where are you?
So I'm in Seaford, just by the beach, which is a beautiful spot. My clinic is called China Dragon. My website is chinadragon.com.au. I'm a little bit old school. I don't have an online booking system. I don't do digital receipts. Everything's paper here. I say, hey, it's traditional. It's traditional Chinese medicine. So I'm a little bit old school, but my website's there. People can email me through the website, or find me online. And then I usually take most of my appointments over the phone. And we also have a page on Facebook, China Dragon Medical on Facebook. So.
Well, we'll be including all those links in the footnotes and a little bit of.
Thank you so much.
That you provided me. And just that I might add, the way I came to you was when I had that back trouble. I was working for Bill Trotter, who's a real estate agent at the time. And Bill swore black and blue how you saved his life and his back, and his accolades were just so glowing. I said, all right, I'll go to a Chinese doctor, because I was a bit skeptical at the time. Coming away from that, I've had a profound respect. I think I came to you a couple of times, but you seem to get me back on track very quickly. So if anybody out there does need Chinese medicine, whether it be herbal or acupuncture, and treatment, certainly hit Tyler Rowe up. And thanks so much for coming on board. If you enjoyed this and you want to see a lot more, we've got plenty more. So hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. And thank you, Tyler, so much for your valuable and precious time. It's graciously appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.